Yeah. You see my screen now?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Please make a presentation mode. Yes, good. Great.
Okay, let me see if the video can be seen alongside. Okay. Sorry, can this make it? Good, good. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you today and to talk to you. My name is Hussein Tadicha Wario, as has been said. I'm the Executive Director for Center for Research and Development in Rangelands, which is a non-profit research entity. We are based in Northern Kenya, Marsabit County. And it's a pleasure to join this team to give a short talk. And while preparing this talk, I wasn't sure about who the audience are. So I just tried to keep as much as possible to keep it simple to the basics, and I hope you will be able to follow. And what I'm going to talk about is basically issues around pastoral mobility. Mobility, that's the movement to access pasture, water, and other resources. And I will speak on a case study that shows how can we study, how can we understand mobility in a bit of more detail. So I'll start by giving a broad intro, and this is just to start us off around pastoralism, what it is, and then we will proceed to issues around how do we look at mobility to better understand. So just for a quick intro, as you know, pastoralism is a way of life, and it's not only a cultural practice, but it's also economic, and it's quite intertwined with people's lives, particularly in areas such as the dry lands and areas that are not favorable for crop production. And these production systems, it depends on naturally occurring forage. And if you want to contrast, for instance, pastoral production system with other livestock production system, in simple terms, it is where the livestock go and get access to fodder where it is located, rather than fodder being brought to the livestock in other system. So this particular production system is quite important in wherever it occurs, because especially it has the ability to convert cellulose, which is matter that cannot be ingested by humans, to high quality food, particularly meat, milk, hides, whatever that you can get from the livestock. And the production system happens in an environment that is usually highly variable, where there's frequent change, and the areas where mainly pastoralism is produced does not support cropping per se. And it's a system that requires low external inputs. In this particular setting, as I've said, it's a practice that is really intertwined with people's culture, identity of the communities that produce. And it's been proven to be the most sustainable production system, especially in the dry lands, and it can coexist also with other land uses. Just to give a view of pastoralism globally, because pastoralism is practiced in every continent that we have. On the upper side, you can see the Arctic, where herders such as Sami, for instance, rare reindeer. You can go to India, where pastoralists like Rabbi keep camels, keeping sheep. To Australia, to Africa, of course, with the varied livestock species that we keep, and all the way to the Americas. So this just shows the diversity of the production system. And what I'm going to talk about, issues around mobility, is quite relevant for all this, because as I've said at the opening, the livestock have to find fodder in a highly variable environment where resources vary over time and space. So when you talk about mobility, it's a strategy. Actually, it's an adaptive strategy to the conditions that are there in these areas that others will call marginal. And when talking about mobility, a lot of times people just go, and often we use this term where we say, oh, pastoralists go around searching for water and pasture. And it's not a matter of searching actually, because pastoralists basically using their extensive knowledge, they know, and it's a complex practice. It's a complex practice which is guided by knowledge. And mobility also, in terms of its understanding, I will say, and that's what I will talk about, it's limited by uh, our understanding is limited about it. Sometimes we oversimplify when we talk about mobility and how we present it, often showing mobility in form of arrows, seasonal mobility. When we just say pastoral is just moved, seasonally, and we show arrows in different colors without really much of details. And I want to show a little bit of more of how we can study. So when we see just such descriptions, it oversimplifies, the realities and the practice of mobility, and therefore limits our understanding, between the linkage of herders, their knowledge systems, what they observe, around the livestock, and it's important to understand, mobility in details and in terms of how we understand it across different scales. I will present a short case study of something that we have undertaken in southern Ethiopia, which is within the Boran pastoral system. And here we wanted to see, how can we contribute to better understanding of mobility using methodologies that can give us more details at different scales, looking at, even individual herds, how they move, and linking it to communal practice. And in this study, we have used various methods to be able to get this data. We have done participatory mapping for us to better understand, how pastoralists perceive the range itself in terms of different units it has, and also did calendars, asking people where have you moved to, and the reasons why, and over what period herders have accessed certain grazing units, and then using also other advanced methods like GPS tracking, track livestock for some months, about 14 months, to understand where they move to. But in all these also, we did had interviews. We also analyze photography to see, range conditions, how they are. For instance, that photo of a herder um, is one of these solar powered GPS devices that herders go around with. So for this study, as I've said, our first step was to understand the range. And we did this by printing out, Google image at a scale where various features can be seen and can be recognized by the herders. And this enabled the herders to be able to recognize landscapes, recognize different resources, and are able to give us names and map out grazing units, like what you see on that image. Of course, it's not very clear on the photo. And this enable us to georeference these units and be able to um, sort of synchronize GPS data with GPS tracks with these localities that were given. And when we looked at the various areas that we selected for a study, we found out that constraint in mobility differs with different pastoral systems and for different reasons. And in some areas which are densely populated, and particularly because those spaces are also used for, other livelihood aspects like bits of small scale farming, the constraints are higher. And we find that localities around settlements are used around all around the year, unlike the practice where pastoralists usually leave the settled areas for use in the dry season we see in highly densely settled areas, use is happens across the year. And to cope with that, you could see that if you look at the shades that we have made on this, the dark shades on the map are reserved areas where pastoralists say nobody should go in there until a certain time. And then there are certain the ones that are shaded in mesh are the ones that are only visited during wet season. So if you see across the three images, which are three different sites, the mesh ones is not available in either of the other two. And this mesh is where it's open grazing during the wet season, which is not available to others. And this is where herders will say, oh, there are more nutritious grass species and forbs. And this is where when we take our livestock, we don't even provide salt for it. It has salty plants. We don't really treat our animals of any diseases because it's really good. So these are some of the things that we get from the herders, and the variability can be shown by these photos, which were taken by herders as they herd, and they show how forage condition changes, and also in some instances, like the picture on the extreme right, you could see leaves litter from trees sometimes becomes the main livestock feed. And of course, these are the photos that we used against when we have conversations with the herders to basically understand why they are in certain sites and why not other sites, and to understand their mobility. Moving to now, GPS tracking. As I've said, we have tracked livestock, and this is now a zoomed in version of the map that you have seen that is now showing two different sites. And this the first one, the one here that you are observing here is wet and dry season in a densely populated area. And we use this to triangulate with the information that we got from herders conversation, and also it can help us to visualize the constraints. And if you can look at the map, the first one, the wet season, and even the dry season, one thing that you can see the difference when I show the next slide is the dense black part, which you call HB, that is the home base, did not change. This herder stayed at the same spot, but the only thing that changed was where does he say access water and grazing. And the grazing, where you have the shaded areas, are reserve areas that they access during dry season, or when wet season is not so good, they could access that as well. So this elaborates how others make decision, and you could see in terms of the numbers that you see there, either they're going to water when they're moving a little bit of a distance, and you could see how they can repeatedly graze in certain areas for some time, which shows one, how governance works, also the control that people have put, and also the constraint, because they don't have a lot of choices in terms of mobility. In contrast, this is now from an area that is less constrained, an area that has even wet season grazing area. The screen, the part of the screen on the left, you can see the herder has a home base, which is HB, and then he has even a satellite base. He has a satellite camp. You can see the SC there up on the upper left-hand side, and they keep on changing. Even within a month, they change the sites, and they graze in different areas and cover different distances. Same way, if you look on the half of the screen on the right, you can see even around the home base, you could see here now the itinerary is actually similar to the area with constraints, where now the herder is based at one locality more, but grazing in areas that are reserved and visiting water wells. But even here, he manages to change his base, so he can have a satellite camp as well in the dry season grazing area, which is the upper left of that. So this shows actually how the production practices happen, and mobility is practiced using different modes of access. So in conclusion, I will say that here what we wanted to demonstrate is how we can use participatory, approaches to get information around mobility, and how different methods can build into each other. We can use participatory map to understand the range, use seasonal calendars to understand movement, and also map using GPS devices to show real-time uh, movement, and also at the varied scale, at a level where there's a lot of constraint and a level where an area where has less constraint, this can become uh, very clear. And even individual households, within the same area, we have seen specialize in different ways of movements and can use different scale. And of course, there are other factors, for example, which in discussions we get, like, for example, availability of labor, availability of food for herders can also limit movements of individual household herds. And of course, one thing that we can say is that this method can be improved on. Tracking can be done for longer, and even the mapping can be done also at a better scale, for instance, using advanced satellite imagery where forage can also be actually seen. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I'll give you the chance maybe to ask questions or comments um, on this. So I just keep it to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. Now is the session for the questions and your reflection. There are a couple of questions already in the chat box, and some people may also speak on video or the audio.
From David, which says, when interviewing herders, questions and key informant interviews. So David, thank you for this question. And when interviewing herders, I will say that because what we looked at mainly was, a given herd and the decision made around that, we talk to herders individually because their cases are different. So for us to understand details in terms of how decisions are made and what affects the decision in terms of where to move to, when to move, and how long to stay at a certain locality. But I would say that beyond the herders, sometimes the herders are not the herd owners. So we also speak with herd owners as well, just to understand, because sometimes the herders cannot make the decisions on their own, but it's the herd owners who make that particular decision. So in this particular case, of course, the key informant interviews with herders is mainly what we used in terms of interviews, and then correlating that with the tracks that we made. For focus group discussions, especially when it is a communal aspects of grazing in terms of governance, grazing controls, focus group discussions give important information. But when it comes to the practice, because sometimes when you have that focus group discussion, people will tell you about the ideal, how things are planned. But when you have these individual conversations and the follow up, you get the reality of how the practice is. And then when I say mobility constraints, what I mean is when either because of spaces, especially in this case, um, the herders do not have room for maneuver. Uh, the choices are quite limited. For instance, in the central parts of the Boran rangelands, because of the high number of settlements and because of small farmings and fencing, for grazing research people do, there's very limited room. So others will basically use some governance systems like enclosures or communal enclosures that are used during dry season, and wet season, people will just move around their settlement. So that is what I meant by the constraints. So when you ask how the results of the study are applied, and then you talk about your study being in agricultural sciences, okay, good. Indeed, My study was also in agricultural sciences where I did this. Of course, specializations can differ. And this particular study now first can help us understand, the complex decision making that herders undertake, and particularly when we have, for instance, work to do with the herders, where to support in terms of, grazing management. It's easy for us to use this understanding to work with them to manage their grazing resources and supporting some of the governance systems that are there, that are in place. It gives that kind of understanding. And also it shows, this kind of study can show how the governance systems actually work, whether areas that are reserved for dry season only used during dry season, or there are breaches, people do not adhere to it, and then how can that maybe be mended in conversation with communities. So that's what I can say can be an application of this particular study. And now, maybe to more complex issues as we speak, with the change in climate, a lot of people are getting into carbon trade, carbon credits from the rangelands. And one of the things that they do is to really manage mobility. And when you have to manage the mobility, you have to know where resources are, where people move to. And these devices, for example, like GPS devices, can clearly show where livestock have moved to, where, for instance, if you want to indicate how governance has worked, this can be a good demonstration. But of course, the question is movements for mobility depends on a lot of other factors that really needs to be taken into consideration. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hussein. This is Isaac from the Karamoja area. And I must say that I think it's more or less the same approach, comparing your case study with the realities on the ground here. Hello?
Isaac, was that just a comment that you are saying it's quite similar in Karamoja as well?
Yeah, I think my network was an issue, but yeah, I was saying that thank you for this presentation. I must say that there are similarities with the mobility within the Karamoja area. But of course, what is clear with mobility is that there are reasons behind it. It could be over conflicts, or to escape conflicts. It could be in search of water, pastures, or something. Always there's something that drives them. And usually you realize that, for example, group herds, we have what to call alomar. Alomar is a composition of different, kraals, and they have one kraal leader. And within the system, we have the scouts that are sent out there, what to call a crib, to look for which areas are suitable or which areas have good grass and pure water. And then a decision is made, of course, not by individuals, but as a group. So, like you mentioned, that there are always areas that are left for the extreme. And indeed, that is the consideration as well on this side. However, mobility within the Karamoja sub-region is getting restricted at the moment because we have mineral exploration, and minerals cover almost the entire area. We have government promoting crop production, and trying to push for sedentarization. Now, when you look at the issues of land is customary land. But at the moment, there are surveys taking place. People are being told to survey the parcels. Yeah, and so that means there will be limited land for pastoralism and mobility. Whereas recently we saw that There is a resource sharing agreement between Kenya and Uganda. Of course, the Turkana mostly and people from West Pokot do migrate to the Karamoja area, during dry season, and only go back when the rains or when some grass has a sprout from the other side. So mobility is going to face a challenge in the Karamoja area because of so many reasons. And I do not know what the world will think about this, because this is the main livelihood of people of Karamoja. Yeah. And, you realize that even the mineral exploration is not something that the pastoralists would go for. And rather, the recent conflicts, and so many factors behind it, including the security itself. So I think this is also a way of to disorganize the pastoralists and to reduce the mobility. So at the moment, many pastoralists here lost so many livestock, and the future of pastoralism in Karamoja is not certain. I'm sure this is the same thing in some other areas in this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isaac, for that contribution. I really appreciate. And I can confirm that in many areas, or most of the areas, the challenge that you mentioned are there, might be in different forms, in different degrees. So, and how you explained mobility is also correct. When making this decision, others usually access what resources are there. They cannot just move. So that is why I actually said herders or pastoralists do not go searching. They know actually where resources are, so they move. And that's why I said mobility is strategic rather than just being haphazard. And that's what has been in the background. Sorry, I don't know. It's raining here where I'm seated. Maybe some noise. I hope you still hear me. So what I can confirm is, yes, these restrictions on mobility is there. And one of the key things that affects pastoralists is the negative view, around mobility. Our systems, particularly our government systems, has not yet accepted mobility as an important practice, as a strategic practice for pastoralists. And we have always worked with this fixed idea that communities have to be settled for them to access, services. We have never tried to adapt services to the mobile livelihood systems of pastoralist communities. So the challenge is there, but in different ways. And when you talk about, these are the land uses that come in, yes, mineral exploration, for example, in your case, in other places, oil exploration, in places in Ethiopia, for example, even irrigated farming, where, commercial farms, displaced pastoralists and agro-pastoralists. In Kenya, one issue, of course, now with a lot of interest with land is with green energy. People are setting up, companies are setting up wind parks and solar parks, which, if not done, in consideration of how pastoralists use the land, then affects mobility. One important thing that you have said also that is important is, while, the systems in the mainstream are not accepting, there's some changes that we see that we have to acknowledge, particularly around policies. We could see some, change in language, change in attitude and recognition of livestock mobility. And one of the examples that you've mentioned around resource agreements, for instance, across the Kenya-Uganda border is one positive one. And if you look at, for example, the African Union, they have this transhumance protocol that has been adopted. But of course, if you look at its implementation, it's a different story. It's not, we don't see it being implemented, but at least it's accepted at that level. And so these are some of the things that we could say are positive. And with these studies showcasing the importance of mobility, we think we can contribute towards these positive changes. So thank you so much, Isaac.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. One thing I forgot was, for example, when the Turkana are coming, into Uganda, you realize that the natives here shift. They give them space, like they shift to other areas, and that is one unique thing. Within pastoralism and mobility, that there is respect and not to cause commotion, and not to struggle for resources. They give way for the visitors and they shift to another area. And I think that's very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Yes.
Thank you.
Galwab, yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Hussein, for your nice presentation. I concur with Isaac, and I also truly agree with you. I have a question along mobility. In the current situation whereby, especially in Kenya, whereby communities are encouraged to register their lands, and then we have this practice whereby the pastoralists move with their livestock to an area where there is enough pasture and water. What will be the situation like if in the next 5 years or 10 years, every community, every ward registers their land? And there are issues of this resource-based conflict, especially in some regions, especially in Kenya, in the arid and semi-arid regions, whereby due to mobility, due to movement of livestock in search of pasture and water, they concentrate in a certain region and thereafter they start quarreling or fighting as a result of scarce resources. If community members now register their lands, and at the end of the day, each community now restrict the movement of livestock to their lands, what will happen in such a scenario? And that is what, at the end of the day, I foresee in Kenya especially. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Galwab. I think that's an interesting question. So what Dr. Galwab talks about is in Kenya, we have the Community Land Act, and the Community Land Act provides for communities to own and manage their lands, and they are able to register their land as communities. And this is occurring also in other countries. For instance, even in Ethiopia, there's land certification, by communities. In Uganda, there's the Community Land Act as well, and in Tanzania, the Village Land Act. So there are quite a number of attempts to ascertain, tenure rights of communities. And these laws have emanated from the fact that communities have been losing land from, for instance, examples even given by Isaac here. And the law, in its principle, is one, to protect the rights of the communities and also to give ownership as well as give management to the communities themselves. But by doing so, the assumption is, because this land, as I've explained, mobility is critical because of the high variability of, resources. This law actually acknowledges this fact. While communities are allowed to register their land, they are supposed to consider seasonal uses, and and these rights, the seasonal rights to use certain land, have to be registered as well. So what is supposed to happen is, when communities now claim and present their claim in terms of, map of their area and the membership, there's need for discussion with the neighbors, the neighboring communities, such that the neighboring communities can also put forth their interest in this particular land, and that interest is considered and registered. And any community actually that does not respect that kind of arrangement will be found to be not following the constitution, because one central aim is access, in terms of, having equality in access. So these are some of the things that needs to happen. But I agree with you, Dr. Galwab. There's this fixation from, our experiences with private lands. When we talk about now registering land, drawing borders between communities, people always have this image of, concrete or fixed borders between communities that can hinder mobility. So that notion has to be dispelled, and communities are made to understand that yes, they can own and manage their land, but they have to provide access rights to others who have the seasonal rights over that land. So that is how mobility is supposed to be maintained. I hope I have answered your question. It's quite noisy on my end here. I hope you hear me.
Yeah, I do hear you. Thank you very much for a nice presentation. Thank you.
Any other friend wants to speak? Any other question or reflection, please?
Hello. I think Christine has a question in the chat box.
No, it's already been answered. Thanks, Cynthia.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, please. I will appreciate if you can drop the questions in the chat, because it's quite noisy on this end because it's raining heavily where I am. Can you kindly drop it in the chat?
Well, can you hear me? Because it's sometimes difficult for me to write it down. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Cynthia Hathaway, and thank you for your presentation. I'm an artistic researcher, and I'm very curious about potentially sort of interdisciplinary partnerships that you maybe have considered or used in order to bring all this information out, and potentially not just to policymakers, but to the general public. Do you ever do a sort of interdisciplinary research about mobility?
Thank you, Cynthia. For us, currently, we do transdisciplinary research, and these are on different issues. And when I say transdisciplinary, is where, various disciplines join hands, in understanding a problem and working very close, with the communities in a participatory method, understanding an issue and co-generating solutions with communities. For example, not on mobility, but rather on rangeland governance, we have an ongoing research project that looks at how can communities take advantage of advances in digital technology to be able to improve governance of the rangelands. We still borrow from the methods that I've given. One is still understanding the context from the community perspectives, looking at the rangelands, the qualities that they observe, and what they need to monitor in the rangelands, using photography to take, photos of important plant species and plant species that are not maybe desired and has negative impacts on the range, and using advanced, what I can say, AI rather, to be able to classify these plants such that on a satellite imagery, you can show in different colors the occurrence of these plants. And once you have several patches of this, you can map larger areas to show the occurrence of certain species. And because from the communities, the utility of this particular species, when it's available, the advantage it has for different livestock species. And when you map that, then it can help communities to make mobility decisions. And this is something that we are working on. But at the same time, so in this particular study, we have social scientists, we have people who are ecologists, we have even veterinary scientists, because some of the issues that affects mobility is occurrence of diseases. Monitoring that and reporting that is an important issue. And we have people who are in, artificial intelligence and be able to model things out. So in this combination, one thing that we think can be a good output is an application that, can show these conditions of rangelands in real time in different areas for governance and for mobility decisions. So this is just an example. And in our research, we try and use this transdisciplinary approach, and we take quite our time, with communities in understanding issues from their context and trying to answer, or rather work on the objectives of what is important for them. So that's what we do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Dr.
You're most
Hussein,
welcome.
Dr. Hussein, I have one question, or rather, I should say, could be a compliment, or my point is like the geotechnology you have been using for the research, right? And as you have explained that you have a big research project addressing different dimensions, but essentially using the geotechnologies in generating the data and for different purposes. So my point is to ask you whether you have done any experiment with the communities through a participatory process, whether the people can use the geotechnology by themselves, not used by the researchers. Like the researchers are trained in the technology and they create the data for some purposes. But I'm to ask or understand whether you have done any experiment and how the communities can be empowered to use these technologies to overcome their difficulties, or to just understand the weather patterns, or to plan their mobility in a better way, so that they do not face the sudden adversities across their routes, okay, when they move. So I'm asking because I have read some experiments done in Tanzania and some part of Borana zone as well. So are you doing, or you have some knowledge about it is going on somewhere?
Yeah, thank you. That is an interesting aspect. We are not doing experiment per se of that sort, but in this particular project that I've explained, we are trying to see how best can communities understand this technology, for instance, using a smartphone. So what we do is give them basic understanding of how a smartphone works. But again, what we look at is how can they be able to interact with this research output that we would like to produce, and for them to, as you've said, be able to use this technology themselves in a way that, for instance, they are able to post, how the range condition is. They're able to take photos. For instance, they're able to send audio messages on issues, and they're able to, talk to experts in terms of what they want to monitor on the range. So we are at a stage where we're looking at promoting that understanding of basic technologies and looking at what is it that is of interest to them that we can work on, to be able for this technology to help them monitor, track, and also make decisions. So that is what we are doing, but we haven't reached a level where I can say we have enabled communities to be able to use the technologies themselves. So thank you.
Yes, right. You have correctly narrated. Actually, I'm raising this point in this forum because many people are associated with these activities and these interests. So here, actually, the critical is the research is one part is fine, like taking decisions or making policies, etc. But the point here is that whether the hardships of the pastoralist people are reduced or not by using these technologies. This technology is simplistic thing that one experiment was done like 15 years ago in Tanzania. Today, this kind of the things are very popular. That experiment was done like through using the mobile phone. The banks were linked. I'm not exactly recalling the name of that project. Was very interesting project when the like over the route, it the pastoralist like herders take a longer time. For example, 3 months or sometimes more time is required to complete the cycle of the mobility. So over this period of time is a long time, and their families may need some money if this herder is selling out some product like milk or cheese or something, whatever, or sometimes maybe the meat. So at some particular point, this herder, if is raising some money out of this activity or this product, so the how the money should be sent to the family. So this project was linking these herders with the bank, and there was a mobile transaction of the funds. So nowadays it is very popular everywhere through the UPI method or some other online methods. So this is very common. But for herders, it was a very good beginning. So similarly, you have the GPS, we have the GPS, we have geotagging, we have so many advanced, very easy mobile apps as well. So the herders also can communicate within themselves. So they are not together at one point of time or at one point of location. So sometimes somebody is following behind. So somebody is ahead and somebody is not finding an adequate water at the particular water hole. So can communicate with the followers that okay, this you can decide to change the route. So this is just an example how this kind of the technologies can be used by these people, and they can similarly they can also communicate the weather changes over these routes. So my just understanding is that if we really empower the communities, these pastoralist communities using different technologies, so probably the hardships will reduce. Otherwise, of course, for just just for other purposes, research purpose or some other experimental purpose, we have been using even drones. Okay, so those are the very hi-fi things. Point is how ordinary person, herder can access, not only access, but also utilize all these things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that elaboration. And I've said yes, there are aspects of technology that pastoralists can quickly adapt to and use, of course, depending on context and what service can we offer. And of course, currently use of cell phones even to make calls to inform each other about rangeland condition, if there's any danger, that's already happening a lot. One thing that we see is also that, and also I see a question here by, is it Stepia? Especially how do we sort of work on this when most of the pastoralists have not gone to school and internet is a challenge? That's true. Not going to school, yeah, is a challenge, but one of the things that we're trying to do is, use of icons that they can recognize when they want to do one or two things. they can use. For instance, currently, even on WhatsApp, just basically using the microphone icon to record a message and share in a group is something that pastoralists who have not gone to school can easily do. And even taking photos and sharing photos when they are trained without even going to school, pastoralists are able to do that. But as you've indicated, there are limitations by availability of these smartphones themselves, because it's only few among the pastoralists who currently have that, as well as you've indicated, internet can be a challenge. Although part of the application that we try to use is an application that can take up information even when there's no internet and be able to display that information when that person is connected to the internet later. So those are some of the things that we're working on. So thank you very much. Sipe, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm living in Albania and working with the pastoralist community. We tried to learn, most of the pastoralist community, the shoppers didn't have the occasion or very little to go to school. And we tried to make some courses to use high-tech, all this kind of technology. It was totally impossible. Even they said, if I'm going inside a computer, a WhatsApp, whatever, I will lose all the contact with the nature. But the second thing is that in many places where they are for transhumance, they have not any possibility. They have many times to walk a lot just to find some wave for the just to find some wave that a phone can be used, and to use this kind of possibility. The only thing what we have found is to some of the children of the shoppers who likes to work and they are more aware and more sensitive to all this technology. They are somewhere and they can make a kind of a relay. But we have a very big problem and have not resolved at all this question. So I don't know how the others in our countries, and maybe if you have the same kind of problems, you can do. And it's going up to the point that, for example, each year there are people losing their life because they cannot say, I have a medical problems or things like that.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. I didn't get that completely clearly, but what I got is the challenges that you faced, when trying to help pastoralists understand technology. It depends on what kind of technology, and of course, how we approach it also. And sometimes interest is one thing that uh, hinders or motivates. So if it's something that they find useful, interesting, people are motivated to learn. But of course, the complexity of what we also try to introduce can be a challenge. Of course, what we also try to do is work with, for example, the youth who are already having certain level of formal education and they are there within their communities, and these ones can adopt new ideas, new technology, and they are able to work with their community. So that is one of the things. Thank you so much.
I have one question. Hi, Dr. Hussein. My name is Munene from Kilifi, Kenya. And this question will go to you and also probably other members in this meeting. Just wait. I'm in a meeting. So my question is, it's based on your presentation on the idea of home base. And there was a question 2 days ago from one of the colleagues that we are attending this course with, Uta. are there completely nomadic communities in Africa? Her question was worldwide, but now to you, in Africa, are there completely or fully nomadic communities? Because we see a lot of nomadic communities having a home base and even a secondary base, and they get to stay there for several months, come to a home base, probably due to schooling or any other factors. So in your experience, and maybe to other panelists here and colleagues, are there fully nomadic communities with home bases?
Yeah, thank you, Munene. I hope I got your question. You're asking if there are completely nomadic communities. And I will say that practice of nomadism, and nomadism in this particular context where entire family moves with the herd, has reduced a lot. And we don't see that happening in parts of Kenya where we are, only to a very limited extent. On occasions, we could see families, entire families moving with their livestock, or part of the families moving with their livestock. And where I had the home base and secondary home base is where this herder managed to move even with his household at the time temporarily to a certain area. And this is occasional kind of occurrence. And as you've also said, one of the limitations that people have currently is they still need to access services. They still need to access markets, schools, hospitals. So because of this, what we see mainly is herds are mobile with the herders, but families are more sedentary. But on few occasions, for example, if you visit counties like Wajir, you can find some families still moving with their camels to grazing land. So I can say there are situations where you can find families who are nomadic, but I cannot say if there are nomadic communities per se, but families that still move with their herds, you can occasionally find them. But generally the herds remain mobile. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I see a hand from Liban, and the time for this is up, so I can take the last one from Liban. Boru, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hussein, for your nice presentation. I'm Liban from Ethiopia, particularly from well-known pastoralist community of Borana. Yeah, I think it is luckily that the issue of mobility is now the concern everywhere, but it is through mobility that we can wisely utilize rangeland resources like forage and water. But from time to time, this mobility is getting decreased due to many reasons. Yeah, we can mention different reasons. Like maybe some reasons are maybe supported by policy issues, and some maybe due to climate change, some maybe due to the human population, and even some development, like even the irrigation in rangelands are maybe caused to the shrinkage of rangeland, and then reduced livestock mobility, and even the overall what we call mobility. So I'm wondering, Dr. Hussein, if maybe how we can harness such technology with the indigenous knowledge. For example, in my community, they have their own indigenous knowledge how to manage rangelands. Within this, yes, they can maybe classify rangelands for young animal, or for dry cow, for milk cow, and so on. So, and this, there is maybe livestock movement limitation. The livestock who can go long distance, they maybe go for long kilometers to search feed and water. Yeah, even this is happened for home-based pastoralist community, and then they maybe limit the mature animal around the settlement. So they have such traditional rangeland management practices. So I'm asking if we can do such, you see, the harnessing those technologies, like what you did, like mobility track, in maybe like, for example, around the settlement and then far from the settlement. Yeah, I'm just picking this as a simple example, but we have different traditional management practices, which maybe they are acknowledged due to for their increasing biodiversity, reducing overgrazing, and so many ecological benefits. So how we can harness such technology with indigenous knowledges, because our community, maybe they are not going to just totally imply those technologies unless we maybe harness with their traditional practices. That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liben, for explaining also the context. One important thing that you've mentioned is, yes, and I've said, particularly mobility depends a lot on the knowledge, of the range of the livestock, and this is what is quite important. And at the start, when we do that participatory mapping, is basically to acknowledge, to understand the knowledge that people have. And in our current study that I briefly mentioned, it's how to make that knowledge, or for us to see the range, in the eyes of the communities based on the qualities that they see in the range. So the attempt here is really getting the information from them, and then that information being converted into images, for instance, through colorization of certain qualities, for it to be observed even on a satellite image, rather than just, for example, using NDVI, which is a greenness index. So it's important, as you've said, for us to be able to use this knowledge and make technology be able to adopt it as well. Of course, the challenge is this knowledge is also getting lost, and constraints that we have also touched on affects, even if you know that you are supposed to move to a certain area, constraints make it difficult for people to move, or the circumstances that they are in. And these are some of the limitations that we need to appreciate. But otherwise, thank you very much for that important comment and question. So I think in the interest of time, we'll stop there and can take guidance from the Grassroots Institute. And I would say thank you very much for your attention and the interactive conversation that we've had. And I would like to connect with anybody who has interest in this topic and others around pastoral systems. Feel free to get in touch. Let's keep the conversation going. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. Thank you for your time and your attention you have given to all the participants and their questions. Is anyone having any issue or problem with the platform related to quiz or related to any other segment? Is everything going well?
Going as it should be.
Please. Yes, please. Please speak out.
No, Cynthia was saying it's going as it should be. It's going well.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. 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 So we close the session of this session, and then tomorrow we will meet again, and in fact tomorrow as well as day after tomorrow. Okay. So take care and see you tomorrow again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.